Welcome to Tripping Over the Ottoman. I'm David Van Deusen, here with my co-host, Abby.
And David and I are two super fans from totally different generations that take a deep dive into episodes of the one thing that unites us.
And that is the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Today, instead of our usual episode discussion, we're going to be having a very special bonus edition for all of you listeners.
And that's because I have gone back through my Dick Van Dyke Show archives and will be sharing some very rare interview audio clips that I have with Frank Adamo. And to be honest, Abby, I don't know if anyone else has any recordings of anything like this with Frank. So I think today's segment will really be appreciated by fans of the show.
100%. I mean, this is the rarest of treasures surrounding the cast and the crew of the show. And I'm very excited that you all get to hear it today. So to Dick Van Dyke Show aficionados like ourselves, Frank is the guy so often recognized in the background scenes of episodes of the show. So he's, a party guest, or he's a delivery man, or a juror, and, so many more, as we'll talk about. Fans often like spotting Frank to sort of the game, like, where's Waldo? Like, where's Frank at in the scene?
Frank's role with the show was really so much more than those bit parts. He was definitely an integral part of the show's success. And in today's episodes, we're going to discuss how did this all come to be? And hopefully we'll provide answers to that question, as well as many other interesting little tidbits of insider information for you fans of the show.
And, to be honest, if anyone that's a fan of the show, you know that Frank hasn't participated much in a lot of the reunions and things that have to do with the show after the fact. And so I always assumed, like maybe some others, that, maybe he didn't enjoy his time on the show, or maybe he wasn't a nice guy, But you will see by today's episode that very much the opposite on both of those accounts. So let's begin today with Frank kind of a little bit in his own words telling us about his early life.
I was born in 1930 in January in a little town called Laurelton, Long Island. I went to public school there, and I graduated public school, and I wanted to go to art school because that was what I was interested in. I ended up going to a vocational art school in Manhattan called Industrial Arts, which is no longer. And I graduated there and went on to Columbia to study set design. Unfortunately, because there were so many people out of work in the unions, they weren't hiring anybody. And I ended up working for J. Walter Thompson, the advertising agent. And that's actually where I met Dick. He used to come in to do Rinso commercials. And we got to be not close friends, but we got to know each other, and we liked each other, obviously. And, he would come in and we'd have a good time together. And then, sadly enough, because I was working at the studio there at J. Walter Thompson, the union cracked down and said, this man can't be here unless he belongs to IATSE, and this J. Walter Thompson, bless their hearts, didn't want to pay the fee. Instead of me working as an assistant cameraman and building sets and doing some makeup and doing some film editing and kinescoping, they said, well, you can't stay here any longer. I left there around 54 or 55. And then they hired 3 union guys to do my job. After I got laid off there, I went in and I started to study dance, and which was kind of late because I was 25 years old, but I was determined I was going to do something.
So as noted by Frank, he and Dick had been acquaintances in the 1950s, but their professional association did not develop until Dick was cast in Bye Bye Birdie.
I read that Dick was going to work and in rehearsal at the Phyllis Anderson Theater down on 2nd Avenue. He was going to do a musical called Bye Bye Birdie. So I marched my little ass down in the middle of a snowstorm and sat outside the stage door. And when Dick came out, I said hi, and he said hi. He recognized me, obviously, and said, what are you doing here? And I said, I need work. And he said, well, I'm going to Philadelphia to do this show. Meet me there. So I said, fine. So I went back to my little cold water flat and read the trades and found out when they were going to be in Philadelphia, and I got on a bus and I went and I thought, what the hell am I going to do there? I had found out that he didn't have a wardrobe person, and I thought, well, that's as good a way as any. So I went to the union, and they said, well, you can't be a wardrobe person unless you join the union. And I said, well, what does one have to do to join the union? And they said, you have to pass the sewing exam. So I had an 80-year-old blind lady trying to thread a needle, telling me how to do it. And I said, it didn't make much sense to me, because I figure if an actor comes off stage and his flies wide open, you're not going to do anything but put a safety pin on it. passed the test and paid them the dues, got on a bus and went to Philadelphia. And got into the dressing room, which was very dismal. And I gussied it up and, went out and bought towels and stuff and fixed up his dressing room as I thought it should be. And he showed up and he looked very surprised. So he said, okay, you're here. So that was it. And I stayed with him out of town, and then the show went into New York, and it was quite successful.
Now, of course, Dick's role in Bye Bye Birdie, it led Carl and Sheldon to visiting the show in New York to see him perform, and after seeing him perform, asking him to join them in their new television project, which was, of course, the Dick Van Dyke Show.
And after a year, I guess it was about a year, Sheldon Leonard came backstage and said to Dick, we're interested in you doing a pilot. And Dick said, oh, and I guess, yeah. And so he said, yes, he'd do it. So Dick said to me, would you be willing to go to California? And I said, sure. So off he went, then off I went on my own, totally on my own. I paid my own way. And he said, well, I don't know what I can pay you. I said, don't worry about it, we'll manage. So off he went with his family, and I went with myself. And so I got there, and he started the pilot, and it was successful, and then we went on to do the series. And while doing it, dear sweet Sheldon said to me, why don't you work as his stand-in? And I said, fine. We were basically around the same size in those days. And so I became his stand-in, and doing all the secretarial work and doing, administrative kind of things for Dick, and setting up appointments and screening calls and answering fan mail, and then working on the set with the crew and with the cast.
Let's hear Frank explain how these bit part appearances came to be.
Very often we would have sit around the conference table, going through a script, and they'd say, well, let Frank read for the actor that's not here. So a few times I did that. Sheldon finally said, well, why don't we let Frank do it? And so, bless his heart, I got my card, my union card. So anyway, that's how I started with my little bit part. I got the salary that Dick gave me, plus I got my my union salary. If you say 3 words, or 2 words, or a whole sentence, you get, as long as you speak, you get money. And I was a non-contract player. God rest Sheldon. I thank him every night in my prayers for what he did.
So I have done a very thorough review of each and every Dick Van Dyke Show episode and determined that Frank actually appeared in 70, count them, 70 episodes of the show, the most of any guest star or bit player.
I love that you did that, David.
I have a document. If folks are interested in it, send us an email, Tripping Over the Ottoman, and I'll share that with you. What I find most intriguing is that in some cases, he actually made multiple appearances in the same episode.
Unreal.
For example, in the Sam Pomerantz Scandals episode, Frank first appears in the very beginning of the episode as an attendant at the front desk of the hotel. Watch the episode and see. But as the show progresses, then we also see that he's a member of the audience, seated toward the right front of the audience. The show continues throughout the rest of the episode, and then actually you see him seated in the rear of the audience. And then right near the very end, we finally spot him in the left front of the audience. So it within this one episode, obviously shot through different segments and different times, they must have said, okay, Frank, you sit there. No, go sit back there, whatever. But watch the episode and you could literally see him jump around from one spot to the next.
Yeah, it's like there's someone cloning Frank, somewhere.
That one is a particular favorite of mine because of the fact that he's literally in it 4 times.
Oh, it's wonderful. Besides these bit parts where he's sitting in a chair or, off to the side, he had speaking roles as well. So in terms of those roles he did portray, Frank remarked that he really enjoyed playing the role of H. Fieldstone Thorley. You might remember him in I'm No Henry Walden. He's the gentleman that writes Lavender Lollipops.
Lavender Lollipops, right.
As well as the role he portrayed in Punch Thy Neighbor.
Jerry Paris, as the neighbor, does something to goad Dick, I think, and then I come in and sing this telegram. But that also was one of my favorites because I really, really stopped the show.
And he also had some other really fond memories from the show, particularly his role as the vet's assistant in the Never Name Him Duck episode.
Yeah, Frank tells a great story about trying to handle the out of control kangaroo in the vet's office.
During the day, I went to the trainer and I said, look, I want to, get friendly with this beast. I would feed him and kind of walk with him a little bit so he got used to my smell. Jerry Hausner, who was the little guy I was to hand him over to, he didn't want to have any truck with this animal. I can't say that I blame it, the prettiest thing to work with. But anyway, I got stuck in this cubicle just before I made my entrance because they didn't want the audience to see him. And when I went out on my cue and went to hand the animal to Jerry, the audience just got hysterical. Jerry grabbed the chain, and the kangaroo wasted no time. He just went straight cross stage, dragging Jerry with him. And part of the problem was he was supposed to have rubber sole shoes on, but he didn't. And I think after the show we did a couple of takes, but my part of it, I think, was okay. Poor Jerry Hausner, I think he wet his pants.
Such great stories. I love that one. So Frank also, kind of strangely, developed a friendship with Richard Haydn.
Yeah, the fish man, Edwin Karp.
Yes. And fans will remember the Edwin Karp episode with the radio man.
I love working with Richard Haydn. He played I'm no Edwin Karp. Richard had been an old favorite of mine in movies years ago, and we got to be very good buddies. He had surgery or something. And Carl had said to me, would you kind of run lines with him and so on. I don't know why, because Richard was smarter than the whole world. And I did, and we became friends. And I used to do an imitation of him, doing an imitation of me, and doing an imitation of him.
So funny that he developed this relationship with Richard. I would absolutely kill to have seen that imitation that Frank was describing. It sounds amazing. Frank continued as Dick's personal assistant, and he was also, though, a stand-in for Dick during the filming of various things like Mary Poppins. He was kind of the same build and the same height, and so they used him quite a bit for that.
It seems like wherever Dick went on a project, Frank came along.
Very much so, very much so. So apparently in Mary Poppins, if anyone's familiar with the movie, there's the I Love to Laugh scene where that's the song I Love to Laugh. And Dick and another character are suspended kind of in the air, probably on wires. And there was some sort of plastic seat or something they had to have underneath Dick to hold him up, like suspend him on these wires. And Frank's butt was used as the mold for the seat that Dick was going to sit on. So pretty personal stand-in work there. But apparently in Mary Poppins also, there's the flying nanny scene, if you remember. There's all these nannies lined up outside the house. And Mary Poppins arrives, and the nannies all fly away into the air. And apparently, Frank plays one of those flying nannies. I have watched it many times. I cannot locate Frank. However, I suppose he's probably dressed as a woman in the scene, so I'm sure I can't find him. But if anyone else has found him in that scene, let me know. I would love to know where he's at.
Yeah, I don't know which one it is either, but Frank says that he was one of them.
It's so great. So in addition to, all the Mary Poppins involvement, Frank also had parts in Fitzwilly and also Disney's Lieutenant Robin Crusoe. And
while Frank was involved on a professional level with Dick, he was also involved on a very personal level with Dick's wife, Marge, and he often babysat for the Van Dyke children. Tells the story how he loved to cook with them and often prepared his special recipe for lasagna. And the Van Dyke kids have said it was absolutely fabulous. And Frank actually shared that recipe with me, and I have it in my Dick Van Dyke Show archives. I think I even shared it during the run of the Walnut Times. I think I printed
you
that.
Did. I think it was in the newsletter.
And my Frank Adamo issue.
Yeah, very cool. After the Dick Van Dyke Show ended, Frank continued to assist Dick. Like you said, where Dick goes, Frank follows. He continued to assist him on the new Dick Van Dyke Show, and then eventually moved on to be Mary Tyler Moore's assistant on the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
When they decided they were going to do the second Van Dyke Show in Arizona, I went down with them. I worked with Dick down there, Hope Lang and Marty Brill and Fanny Flagg and Hope Lang and David Doyle, who's gone, and I forget who else. Anyway, we ended up down there, and it got to be a little hectic, and they finally decided that the show was not going to be continued, and at that point, I said to Dick, look, I'm not earning my money here with you, and I can't take money for doing nothing, So I think I'm going back to L.A. because I had rented my house. So I don't know whether he didn't shed a tear, but I left. I think he was really sorry to see me go, but I couldn't take any money from him. It was just not my principle. So on the way back, I guess Mr. Van Dyke, bless his heart, I think he made a few phone calls. And I no sooner got to my home in L.A. and the phone rang, and it was Grant Tinker, and Grant said to me, "We'd like you to come and work for Mary." So off I went to Miss Moore, and I worked with Mary on her show. I guess I was a total with Mary about, I think, 15 years full-time. The same was with Richard, and about 2-3 years part-time with Mary. And then I said at 55, I've had it. I'm leaving while I'm still got a smile on my face and everybody likes me.
What a wonderful thing Dick did for him. I mean, I think that story really speaks volumes about both Dick and Frank. Frank remained as Mary's assistant for many years thereafter, until eventually, in about the early 1980s, he opened an antique store in Paramus, New Jersey, and it was called Country Accents.
Frank's shop also contained Frank's original artwork creations. Frank was a very, very talented artist. He created handcrafted puppets, masks, marionettes, wooden animals, as well as country furniture reproductions and many other decorative pieces.
Very cool.
And Frank shared photos with me of his work, particularly of the marionettes, and even did paintings. His artwork was just amazing, just
Very
amazing.
Cool. Multi-talented. After finally retiring, Frank first moved to Vero Beach on the east coast of Florida. And there he was very happy being involved in the local theater there, helping out with productions, with the sets and related artwork. Seemed to genuinely enjoy his work there.
So I understand Abby very involved not only with set building, but maybe being on the board there and helping decide what productions they would do and,
Cool.
and all sorts of things. And while Frank was living in Florida, my family vacationed one time and I met him once there. And we had a wonderful visit. He came out to the resort where we were staying, and he brought along with him things to show me. So he brought a number of photos that he had from his personal collection from the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Ugh.
And he also brought along, have you ever heard of the Dick Van Dyke Show music box?
I have not. In all my years of being a fanatic, I have not seen or heard about this. Tell me more. What do you know about this?
One of Frank's responsibilities, including all the other things that he did for Dick, answering fan mail and making appointments or whatever, was to have the responsibility of purchasing gifts for the cast and crew members for around the holidays. Frank was the guy that coordinated the creation and giveaway of the Dick Van Dyke cast ashtray that fans are probably familiar with Dick's caricature drawing. Frank also had the drawing put on playing cards at one point.
That's right.
But then he also facilitated the creation of this Dick Van Dyke Show special music box.
I don't know whether it was the first or second year. I used to have to, part of my little job was to buy everybody gifts. So what I did was I got the score from the Dick Van Dyke theme, and I sent it to Europe, and I had music boxes made with the theme in it. And they're like little walnut cigarette boxes, and you wind them up, and it plays dum-da-dum-da-dum.
Frank also ensured as one of his responsibilities that the copies of the show's scripts were all bound together in vibes at the end of the season. And many of those are still around today. Sheldon Leonard donated his to the University of Wyoming. I think Danny Thomas's scripts are there. When I visited Mary Tyler Moore's home recently in Greenwich, Connecticut, her bound volumes were still there. So what treasured keepsakes that the cast had to have those scripts bound into nice book volumes.
All because of Frank. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, going back to the Walnut Times we were talking about earlier, didn't you also involve Frank kind of somehow in like a practical joke on Rosemary, through the Walnut Times?
Yeah, I did. So during the run of the Walnut Times, occasionally I would schedule events that I called a chat with. So I think we did a chat with Carl Reiner where folks could submit questions or get on a call and speak to Carl. But in this particular case, I talked Rosemary into doing one of these events. And the idea was I would get her on the line and then I would select individual callers. I think we did 3 or 4. And I would do, back in those days, 3-way calling. I would put Rosemary on hold. I would call fan.
The original Zoom.
Yeah. And then I would connect the parties together, and fans actually got a chance to say hello to Rosemarie and talk to her and ask her questions and fun. When I decided to do the Rosemarie one, and I had become pretty good friends with Rosemarie at this point, I decided it would be fun to see if I could involve Frank. So I called Frank and I said, "Hey, Frank, I'm doing this event with Rosemarie." And I laid it out for him and I explained. And I said, "Would you be part of it?" He said, "Oh my gosh, David, I would love to do it."
What a sport.
Frank said he would be happy to be a surprise caller. And fortunately, for all of our enjoyment, all of these years later, I have the recording of that call and I'd like to share that with all of you now.
Rosemarie?
Yeah.
We're there. We're connected now. Our next caller's from Florida. Go ahead, caller.
Hello? Hello? Is this Rosemarie? Yes. Yeah, do me a favor, sweetheart. You tell me who was Tony Arco?
Tony Arco?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you know who was Dooley Duncan?
Dooley Duncan? That was Mel Cooley.
Yeah, that's right. Who named them?
My mother.
That's right.
How did you know that?
Because I was there.
Oh, for God's sakes. Where in Florida are you from?
Oh, from Vero Beach.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you know my brother?
No. But
How did you know my mother?
Because I also know Nupi.
How did you know her?
Well, we was on the same place together.
Where?
In Hollywood, California.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Oh, my dear.
Do you know who this is?
No.
Why not?
Who is this?
It's Frank Adamo.
Frank Adamo?
Yes.
Oh, you idiot.
Surprise, Rosemarie.
Oh, you idiot. You really had me going.
Well, I'm glad I did. I didn't think anybody else knew who Tony Arco was except your mama.
That's right.
How
I
are
can't
you?
even remember who she called Tony Arco.
Yeah. I think it was Sheldon.
No, Sheldon is Sheldon Bernardi.
Well, you have a better memory than I do.
And you doing all right?
Yeah, doing fine.
That's the one. What happened to the antique store?
Oh, that got tough to deal with. After a while, things got too expensive, so we gave it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm okay. I got a bad cold today, but outside of that, I'm all right.
Oh, it's good to hear your voice, Rosie.
Good to hear you, Frank. Oh, my God, what a surprise.
Now, when was the last time you two spoke? Do you recall?
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, no.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, you sound well, dear heart. I'm sorry I really haven't seen you at all, but I wish I could see you.
Well, maybe one of these days.
And it's been good to talk to you, Rosie.
And if I get a chance to
Listen,
come to
get
Florida,
the phone.
I'll try and look you up.
Thank you, sweetheart.
I love you, Frank.
All right, take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.
This was wonderful. It was like listening to two old friends chat and catch up. I mean, and just what a beautiful relationship they still had even after all those years had passed and hadn't had much communication. I mean, I just wanted desperately for them to talk forever, and I would be happy to listen to it.
Well, I thought it was a lot of fun too, how apparently Rosemarie's mother had these odd nicknames.
I didn't know that.
No. In fact, when I was part of that call originally, I'm like, where is he going with this, or what is he talking about? But then, as it all evolved, it became clearer how the whole thing was, and she absolutely was understood it all.
Yeah, we'll have to ask Rosemarie's daughter if she remembers any of other those names that she probably made up. Very cool.
It should be noted that long after the Dick Van Dyke Show, Frank did still have a love for his time with the show and was asked to make a brief cameo appearance with Dick in a 1990s special on Nick at Night. The special was called The Chairman's Choice.
Remember that fondly. Mm-hmm.
The idea was Dick, now as the chairman of Nick at Night, was going to pick his 5 favorite episodes. And the creators of that did some pretty cool things. They involved Kathleen Freeman and they involved Larry Matthews, but they also convinced Frank to come in and portray the part of a delivery man.
One of the few things that he's done after this,
sort of coming into the room with these pile of videotapes, right? Dumping them all on Dick's desk in a stockpile from which to use his favorite episode. And it was just great to see Dick and Frank together on the screen.
Yeah. And you can find this on YouTube. You can still watch this. Yeah. It's very cool.
And I'm sure that it was great for Dick and Frank to have been reunited after so many years.
Now, is it true that in 2004, for the Dick Van Dyke Show Revisited program, that while Frank wasn't in it, he was asked to be a part of it?
Actually, he was. Yeah. So in that reunion episode, there's a scene in Carl Reiner's house where there's a butler. And Carl had envisioned that role of the butler being played by Frank.
How sweet of them to think of him for that.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure what the reason was, but Frank was not available during the week of filming, so he couldn't do it. But I would think Frank would have loved to have been part of that reunion. I mean, everybody was there, right? Dick and Mary and Rosemarie and so many others, and Gilbert. So I bet it was difficult to decline. True to the spirit of the show, though, Carl ended up getting another former Dick Van Dyke Show guest star, Sandy Kenyon, who was in a number of episodes. Sandy ended up playing the role of the butler. So it was still a look back at the past.
Yeah. Eventually, Frank moved with his partner to New Mexico. And in 2018, this is where he did pass away, just shy of 89 years of age. His partner placed a very small, unassuming notice in a Santa Fe, New Mexico newspaper announcing Frank's passing, which apparently, according to his partner, was exactly what Frank had requested. Just something kind of understated, very low key.
Yeah, and there have been conflicting reports online about when Frank died, made only worse by incorrect information that someone had somehow gotten out on IMDb. In the past couple of years, I was finally able to get that information corrected there, and I think also on Find a Grave, so that it's now accurate. Unfortunately, IMDb still only lists Frank in a total of 51 episodes.
They haven't done the document, David.
There's 70 out there, although I'd be curious to see how IMDb handles me trying to submit 3 or 4 appearances in one episode. I don't know. But hopefully at some point, I'll see if maybe I can get all those appearances updated. And
that would be great.
Interestingly, for Dick's 100th birthday, most of us are aware that he wrote a new book, and there's a very brief chapter in that book about Frank, where Dick talks about going through some old newspaper clippings in a box and discovering one about Frank and his time down in Florida working in the theater. But Dick goes on to lament that, unfortunately, he failed to let Frank know when his first wife, Marge, had passed away.
Who he was very close to.
Frank knew Marge very well, as I mentioned earlier, and apparently Frank was very hurt that Dick hadn't informed him. And Dick remarks that he and Frank really never spoke again to reconcile this oversight before Frank passed.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. I mean, so painful to hear that someone, departed this earth with some kind of like bad energy between a close friend. That's terrible. Although I do believe one day they will see each other again in Dick Van Dyke Show heaven, and they will reconcile and clear the air with each other. All will be well.
And it sounds from what Dick wrote that he's sort of come to that in his own mind today too.
Yeah. So some final thoughts. One of the things that really got to me listening to Frank talk was that it wasn't so much about the stories, which, of course, are absolutely fabulous, but rather more who he was as a person. He sounds like he was just a really beautiful human being. I mean, you can just hear it when he's talking. He seems to have had just a really compassionate and gentle heart and spirit as he was talking about not taking people's money when the work didn't warrant it, and, trying to be a kind person or being grateful. It just sounded like he had a wonderfully good heart. And, there's that moment on the phone with Rosemarie as they're hanging up. He says something, like, "Oh, take care of yourself, dear, and love you. God bless." And it's just a small thing, but it kind of tells you everything, that so much time had passed and he felt still that she was so dear to him in that way. And that's just how he spoke to people, that's how he lived. And kind of just an honest, compassionate, caring person. And maybe you notice this too, Dick, but what I also love is the way that Frank kind of seemed to just move through life with this like incredible flow where like he wasn't passive and like waiting for things to happen to him in his life, but he also wasn't forcing anything either. He was kind of just in this middle great flow. So like Dick says, "Oh, hey, can you come to Philly and work for me?" Frank's just like, "Yeah, I'll get there. Do your thing. We'll see each other there," kind of thing. And he just gets on a bus and goes, but there's no like desperation in it. Like, "Oh, I got to get," and it's just sort of this like solid trust that, yeah, things are going to work out, and I just really admire that.
Yeah.
And then, so to me, all of this just says something even bigger about the Dick Van Dyke Show itself, which is, yes, there was magic in the writing. Yes, there was magic in the performances, of course, but it really was in the people at every level. And, the bit, quote unquote bit players, the assistants, the behind the scenes people, every soul involved seemed to sort of just be this uniquely beautiful person. And it was as if like all the stars were aligned and they were infusing like every layer of the process with just like the finest kind of humanity. And I think when you watch the show, that's the goodness that's radiating outward. And I think it's the real factor in the show's kind of special kind of magic it had. And that's what we're all feeling when we watch it. And Frank just seems to be kind of the perfect little embodiment of that phenomenon.
It all started with Carl and Carl's vision and the tone that he set. And then I think Dick also took what Carl offered and extended that as the star of the show to make the environment a warm, friendly, fun, nurturing place where everybody could just shine at their very best.
Yeah, he built this foundation and it just from there it only could go up,
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that it's probably a good idea to end the episode today with Frank's sentiments just about his time working with Dick and then also just the rest of the Dick Van Dyke Show cast.
Probably be the best experience of my life, and because of it, it has just it's given me lots of opportunities that I never thought I would get. There were so many terrific moments that I would be a liar if I said there was only one. Just great moments of joy on that set. Everybody just adored everybody. When we were doing it, I don't think anybody realized what a marvelous piece of work it was going to be, or that it was going to end up a classic. And that's basically what it is. I mean, you can't deny it. I mean, it is just about the best writing compared to today of anything that's on television. And I think the chemistry with everybody was just splendid. And I don't know how to praise it enough. I mean, I look at it now, and I look at it as a total audience person. I look at those people, and I say, well, I don't really know them. I even look at myself, and I say, who is that person? But it's fun, and it's, as I say, it's the situations are always so original, and the acting, I think, is wonderful, and the timing. It's just an incredible piece of work. There are moments when I have real flashbacks about it, and I think, oh my God. People say, well, what was it like? And I tell them, well, it was just working with a bunch of wonderful people. It was just, magic.
So it's apparent to me, and I think probably to you, Abby, that this was clearly a very special time in classic television history.
Absolutely.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode, remembering the legacy of Frank Adamo through these rare and never before heard interviews with him.
And if you'd like to get notified when new episodes become available, just make sure to subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on any of the major streaming platforms.
And remember, we are a Dick Van Dyke Show community, so we value your comments, your questions, your contributions to our discussion surrounding this episode or any of the others that we've done so far. So feel free to leave us some feedback on our YouTube channel or to send us an email at trippingovertheottoman@gmail.com. And we love to see that subject box 703 in the inbox. For today, I'm David.
And I'm Abby. Thanks for tripping over the Ottoman with us. We'll see you next time.